because Zoom allows me to live stream. So normally most people join via Facebook live stream. People don't really join via Zoom. And I think maybe that's the same situation with Teams as well. So I think in the future, we should maybe use Zoom just to make sure that everyone is able to join in, but we'll still upload the sessions on Facebook and Zoom. So hopefully that should help. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our discussion today, which we have organized in honor of Women's Month. And it is an initiative between the Transformation Office's Equality Promotion and Social Inclusion Project and the Universal Accessibility and Disability Services Unit, UADS. And today we are extremely grateful to have Miso as our guest speaker to just unpack the discussion around the prevalence of gender-based violence against women living with disabilities. So whether that increases the rate of vulnerability and risk as far as women with disabilities is concerned. Miso is an activist, and she is also the student coordinator within the UADS unit and is based at George campus. So thank you so much, Miso. It's a pleasure to be working with you on something again. So I think I'll just give you the floor now just to open up our discussion. And I think from there we can share our ideas and input as to this topic, and I think the where we are as a country as far as GBV is concerned, we know that it is a pandemic that we are still fighting with at this particular moment, and I think we need to, at the end of this discussion, unpack how we address this in our different spaces and what the way forward is for us as a collective. So thank you so much, Miso. I'll now hand over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor to come talk to you guys, and shed light on this critical and yet overlooked issue when it comes to gender-based violence and women living with disabilities. This webinar is so significant, and it's a significant step towards raising awareness, fostering understanding, and generating meaningful discussions about this topic that demands our attention and action. But I think before we start with the conversation, it is very wise for me to define the term disability. A disability is any physical, cognitive, or mental condition that impairs a person's ability to perform an everyday task. Disabilities can be temporal or permanent and can range from mild to severe. And there are many types of disabilities, and they can be classified in various ways. So we have physical disabilities, cognitive disabilities, sensory and mental health disabilities. Also, disabilities can also be classified when it comes to congenital disabilities. These disabilities are present at birth, like your cerebral palsy and Down syndrome. You have acquired disabilities. They occur later in life due to illness or injury, or yes, in that sense. And for instance, that would be your spinal cord injury, your stroke, or your brain injuries. And then you have developmental disabilities. These affect a person's physical, cognitive, and social development. That is your autism or your intellectual disabilities. It is important to note that with every disability, they affect each person differently, and they may be they vary also in the classification. It is also important to recognize that people with disabilities should be treated with respect and given equal opportunities to participate in society. Gender-based violence rather known as GBV, refers to any harmful action or threats that are directed at an individual due to their gender, which is in most cases women. This can can include physical, sexual, psychological, or economic violence. When it comes to women living with disabilities, they can face an intersection of challenges related to both their gender and their disability. Women with disabilities are at a higher risk of experiencing GBV due to various factors. Their disabilities might make them more vulnerable to abuse and exploitation, as they may rely on others for assistance with daily tasks. Additionally, societal attitudes and stereotypes about disability and gender can contribute to them being marginalized, and they increase the risk of violence. Now, the relationship between disability and GBV is quite complex. Women with disabilities might often face barriers in accessing support services, reporting GBV, or seeking legal resources. They might also be more dependent on their abusers for care and support. This makes it difficult for them to escape this abusive situation. Therefore, the stigma surrounding disability can lead to these cases not being reported by the individual. Stats have shown that GBV cases, are rising on a daily basis, but also for women with disability, the numbers are quite alarming. There's also been various studies that have been done. They show that women with disabilities are at a higher risk of experiencing gender-based violence. Women living with physical disabilities can suffer the double discrimination of both their gender and their disabilities, making them more vulnerable than any other woman or men living with disability or as an abled body. Therefore, society's inability to transform and accommodate people with impairments can also contribute to the continuous risk of abuse amongst people living with disabilities, especially women. The intersection of gender and disability often creates a perfect storm of vulnerability, making these women more vulnerable to various forms of abuse. It is our duty as advocates to amplify their voices, challenge societal norms, and work tirelessly to ensure their safety, dignity, and rights. One of the major challenges we face in combating gender-based violence amongst women with disabilities is the stigma that still surrounds both disability and the topic of abuse. The prevailing misconceptions about disabilities are on about discrimination, making it more harder for these women to speak out and to seek help. As society, we might dismantle these barriers and create an environment where individuals with disabilities are treated with the respect and empathy that they receive. Recognizing the signs of gender-based violence is crucial in addressing this issue effectively. Often these signs manifest differently for women with disabilities due to communication barriers or dependency on caregivers. It is vital for us to educate ourselves about these unique indicators and to develop skills to intervene appropriately. Remember that silence should never be mistaken for consent. However, we must acknowledge that gender-based violence against women with disabilities is a challenge. It encompasses a physical, as I said, sexual, emotional, and economic abuse, often pursued by others who hold higher power than the person that is living with the disability. As society, our approach to combating this violence must be holistic and inclusive, recognizing that women with disabilities deserve the same protections and rights as anyone else. So what can we do to combat? So what can we do to combat violence against women living with disabilities? Firstly, we need to amplify their voices and ensure their inclusion in decision making. We must advocate for their policies that address specific needs of women with disabilities. We must provide people with information and ensure that there are effective and accessible support services. There's also legal resources for these women and also safe spaces to share their experiences. I've learned that education plays a vital role in prevention. By raising awareness about the rights of women with disabilities and promoting a culture of respect and equality, we can work towards dismantling the systematic factors that influence violence. Empowerment programs, workshops, and support networks are essential in building self-confidence and resilience amongst women living with disabilities. As a society today, our efforts are not just about discussing these issues. They are about taking a stand for justice, equality, and human rights. So let us commit ourselves to create a world where every woman, irregardless of their disability or their ability, lives without the fear of violence. By working together, sharing knowledge, and taking collective action, we can create a lasting change that leaves no one behind. Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Thank you so much, Miso. Yes, rightfully so. I think this is the time where we need to open up the floor for questions. But I think above and beyond questions, I think interactions on the way forward. Miso, I think I also have a question. I did hear you speak about the different types of disabilities that we have or that we would need to be aware of, because I think there's this misconception that when we think disabilities, we only are referring to physical disabilities. So yes, I was extremely grateful that you unpacked for us the different types of disabilities. I think my question then was, when it comes to disabilities, who then are these individuals, these women or children with disabilities, who are they most at risk of then being subjected to gender-based violence by? So who normally are the perpetrators, in order for us maybe to I think about ways in addressing this, and how do we normally identify that a person living with disabilities is currently experiencing gender-based violence? So who are generally the perpetrators of this gender-based violence when we look at women living with disabilities, and how can we identify, or what are some of the tell factors that would alert us to the fact that there has been some gender-based violence? As you said, we must not take silence as a form of consent. So maybe that person hasn't shared the fact that they, or hasn't reported. But even so, even if they haven't reported, we still have an obligation and a duty to report when we suspect that someone else is being violated. So how would we know if that person hasn't actually reported? Thanks.
So in most cases that have been reported, or in studies that they show that women are at risk. The perpetrators are the caregivers, because they take advantage of the fact that, for instance, the person is on a wheelchair. They can't do anything for them. So there's like a power role in it. You need me to survive type of thing. So in most cases, it's the women that are on wheelchairs, women that are solely dependent on someone to take care of them. And you'd find that the caregivers, either be it a female or a male, would do things to the female that that they don't like. And sometimes or sometimes it's also individuals that can't speak. So one knows that if I do something to you, no one's going to really, you can't tell anyone about it. You can't express yourself. So they keep on doing, that vicious cycle. Also, we found that even in workplaces, other people take advantage of women that are living with various disabilities because they know that you need me to do a specific task for you. So it's like a favor. So you must do this specific favor for me, you see. And you see that there's a behavioral change that takes place with the individual. So let's say if the person can't speak, whenever that certain person, the perpetrator, is in the room, you'd see that they don't want them to touch them, or they'll try and say something. You'd see that they're very nervous. But obviously, at times, no one really pays attention to that. Even with the people that live with physical disabilities, you'd see that they're uncomfortable, man, when the perpetrator is around. And that's when then you must ask, are they comfortable having the person there? What happened? And so forth. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Adelaide.
Yeah, thanks so much about that, Miss. So you've spoken about how normally when it's gender-based violence that's occurring against people with disabilities, but more specifically in this context, women, it comes from the caregivers in most instances. So what happens now in an instance where indeed this is the case, there is gender-based violence that is occurring, and the perpetrator is a carer, and maybe this particular woman or this person with disabilities has a disability such that maybe they are speech impaired, so they're unable to communicate. You've then mentioned now some of the telltale factors that we would get, or the signs that we would get that there is some form of abuse happening. What do we do in that instance? So let's say we've witnessed this, or we've seen it somewhere, or we suspect it. What's the next step? What has to happen now?
So in some cases, the carer is someone that is not related to the person, right? They get them via the social worker or the nurses department, right? So that incident would then be reported to social development and to the nursing board, and then also obviously a case will be opened. The person would now need the person, the victim, would now need to do tests, that whole process, that tedious process. They would need to actually undergo it. But also if the person, let's say, cannot speak, then the mother or the sister or the relative that actually noticed this thing needs to be the one what's the word? In Xhosa ke kuhambela phambili, that actually drives the whole process, you see. Also stating what did they see, the change in character, the change in, all those things, so that the social worker can be able to also see from their reports, because when there's a carer that comes from the social worker does rounds, like various rounds in the home, just to check what's going on. So she'll also be able to write a report as to say she also noticed this and so forth. And then the carer will now be dismissed from work. But the sad reality sometimes is that some people don't have the financial capacity to pay for a carer. So the carer would then be a relative. Now, it becomes a challenge because now the family wants to treat it as a family matter. And it becomes then a matter of no, when you must not come to the household, all that family drama that is unnecessary, that then hinders the police to also do the investigation to ensure the safety of the victim.
Yeah, I definitely think that second instance that you mentioned where the carer is a relative I think, is very complicated, because I think we see the same type of treatment or outcome where maybe abuse has happened and it's happened towards a child, and it's not always reported. It's more or less dealt with internally. So this will then have carry on trauma or knock on effects in that person's life at a later stage. I think now just maybe to touch on, I don't know, are there any other questions or comments in the floor? I think I have taken quite a lot of that space. I don't know if there's anyone else who'd like to also share something at this stage, or a comment or a question, or maybe ideas on how to really address this issue. Anyone?
I think um there's something called like community development. I know there is APD. I know there is like within the municipalities like social development, and there are other NPOs, right, that work with children that are living with disabilities and also work with females that are living with disabilities. And what they do, they do like a desanitization, right, of the stigma of disabilities. They hold workshops, of on various topics, so they teach people on what disabilities are. They teach people how to relate to people living with disabilities. They have conversations around GBV and disabilities. So educating individuals, I think for me at this stage, is what a lot of people are doing, just to try and combat GBV against women with disabilities. There's also support groups. So sometimes you'd find that these individuals can't really speak out, obviously, because maybe the perpetrator is a family member. So we need to create safe spaces for them to go and and report and find, I don't know, like a safe haven, I feel.
Yeah, I think that is extremely important. I think maybe to bring it in the context of the institution, I know the initiatives that are available within the transformation office, but I think because you mentioned in the beginning of your presentation, Miso, that yes, we do speak about GBV and we do advocate against GBV, but I think maybe we haven't also looked maybe specifically at the intersectionality between GBV and disability as what we're doing here today. So I know in terms of the Transformation Office, if you have been a victim or a survivor of gender-based violence, there are support groups within the Transformation Office that are available. There's also counseling that is provided either through the Transformation Office or Mtonjeni, or an outside provider in terms of the Alumni in Action program. But I think maybe so. I don't know. Maybe if that is something that you're already dealing with within UADS, where I think support that is specifically for persons with disabilities, because now we in your presentation you've kind of unpacked the risk factors that are there. So we've already spoken here now that, okay, what if the person with disabilities has a speech impairment? So yes, we may have these different outlets of, oh, there's support in terms of the transformation office and there's Mtonjeni and whatnot, but are we suited to support adequately when it comes to disabilities? So I don't know, is there that support that is provided within in your unit specifically, or is that something that in the future there has to be some sort of integration and collaboration to be able to adequately then provide that support? Because maybe in this discussion today we've kind of seen that maybe there's a gap in that support is not fully reaching where it's supposed to reach. Because now in this instance, if it's a student that is living with disabilities and let's say they have an aide, and that aide is the perpetrator of the gender-based violence, how do they then report? Because gender-based violence reports or equality-related reports come to the transformation office, and let's say they're reliant on the aid to, maybe they're blind, they're reliant on the aid and so forth. How to get around and all of that? How then do they end up coming to us with that complaint?
Okay. So as the department, as the unit, we're always trying to, preach inclusion, right? So we always ask the student, we've never really had a case like that, but there's been like minor things, but we always encourage the student to report with the transformation office, because that's where all students report their cases, right? And then it would be, if the report comes to you, for instance, Adelaide, then it would be you who would contact us to say, I received a complaint from Miso, who states that she has a specific disability, and this is what happened. This is the incident. Then that's where we would come in to say, okay, fine, because the person is the carer, we would then obviously now need to find ways, working with the transformation office, of course, and working with Mtonjeni, of saying, how do you remove this carer? Also, informing the parents of the student, because they are the ones that entrusted the carer to the student. So informing the student, removing that carer, finding a new carer for the student whilst the case is being investigated, and that whole process unfolds. For any trauma and anything, we also refer the students to Mtonjeni, right? And sometimes they would come back to say, oh, the process is too long and whatnot and whatnot. But we always encourage them to use the university processes that are there. And yes, I think going forward, we need to have a closer working relationship with transformation, Mtonjeni, and the clinic, when it comes to this specific issue. But we always say the transformation office must deal with the issue as if the student, as if the student does not have a disability, the same way you would do it with other students. But obviously there would be little holes that we will need to patch here and there to make sure that the student does feel protected within the university space.
Thanks for that, Miso. Yeah, because I think that was just my my thing. And I think it goes back to that whole aspect of us all taking responsibility and initiative also to report GBV instances. Because going back to your discussion, Miso, when you spoke about the telltale factors or the signs that gender-based violence is happening, more peculiar to persons living with disabilities. So I think even if it is, let's say, for example, at race and this particular student is, one of your flatmates and whatnot, and you know now the telltale signs of how to know that they've encountered some level of abuse. I think it's definitely a responsibility that we all carry then to be able to report, because I think that was my worry on other reports, especially specific to persons with disabilities, are they then being carried forward? So I think, yeah, it goes back to that, to us all taking that initiative and responsibility to lodge complaints when we suspect that there has been gender-based violence. I don't know if there are any other questions or comments. I think that's what I wanted to know, and I think just to highlight for everybody else as well. But are there any questions or comments from the floor? Okay, so I'm seeing that there's no question or comments. Is there maybe something like parting words that you'd want to leave us with, or something that you would want to highlight for us again, just going forward on back to the discussion of addressing it, what needs to be done as far as awareness is concerned, advocacy, and so forth? Is there maybe something that you want to draw our attention to before we close the session?
I think we must just be part of the advocacy, we must know that it is your responsibility to ensure that we create an environment that is inclusive for everyone. So if you see, for instance, a program that speaks onto disability matters, go and be part of it. Go educate yourself on these matters. Befriend individuals that are living with disabilities, because obviously we meet them in the classroom, we meet them at res, so you must just know the person for who they are outside of the disability. And also, if there's any awkward change that you see in the person, do bring it forward, do speak about it. We must also have support groups for people that are living with disabilities, host workshops, obviously, and seminars and conversations like this where people can learn about disability matters. So it's an each one teach one scenario.
Thanks so much, Miso. And I know you as a unit are very big on that. I know you used to have your Madiba's radio session as well on disability matters. Is that still ongoing?
Yes, that's still ongoing every Monday at 10:30. We do have conversations about disability matters on Madiba's radio. We have social media platforms. For Facebook, it's Universal Accessibility and Disability Services. Instagram, it's at NMU UADS. And I've seen other faculties as well, just like, the Transformation Office also having conversations around disability matters. So I think it is very important for us to avail ourselves for those.
Yeah, definitely, Miso. I see there we do have a question. Please go ahead. I'm glad to see some up.
All right, just a quick one. It's not a question per se, but it is a request. Maybe let me greet everyone. So, Miso, I just wanted to request that you spoke about the support groups, the the organizations that are able to assist or maybe give some education in terms of the GBV and the disability etc. Maybe it would be nice to just drop those on the chat for everyone to see and also to take note of. Also okay, I forgot what you just mentioned now. Yeah, that was just that.
Okay, thank
I
you.
joined a little bit late, so I can't even do some asking and stuff. In fact, I'll in the next few minutes, it would be nice maybe if you don't mind, and the people on the call don't mind, that you do a little summary of what you have what you were talking about, just for people like me who joined a bit late.
Okay, noted. Okay, let me just write in the chat box what you asked about.
Thank you so much for that suggestion. Do we have any other suggestions, questions, comments? Miso will, I have noted that a few people have come in as the session had already progressed. So Miso will do a recap of the presentation and some of the things that we have highlighted during the session. Until then, are there any other questions, comments?
Okay, just a quick recap. I think Adelaide did mention that this is recorded, obviously, and we will share the recording. But we just noted, okay, that we had the need to have this conversation because we saw that there is a rising number of victims of GBV, which are females living with disabilities. And we saw that the cause of that, it's because a lot of people like to take advantage of individuals living with disabilities because there's stigmas around there when it comes to disability matters. And there's also stigma. Okay, sorry, it's scrolling to okay. Sorry. There's stigmas basically about gender-based violence, there's stigmas about disability matters, and it becomes very difficult then to break those walls. And we found that the perpetrators of the violence are the caregivers. Now, the caregivers would be either a nurse or a sister or a brother or an uncle taking care of the person. And they do this because of the power in them, that whole power thing that even if I do this, you won't say anything because you are dependent on me for your livelihood. So we also spoke about how do you then see that a certain individual is being victimized. So I also mentioned that it's through the change of the character. It's also how they they react when they perpetrators in the room. Then that in that way you're able to see that there's something wrong, and then you need to report the violence. So the violence is reported the same way, like through the police station, but also you must also report it with the social worker through social development, also through the nursing board, so that if the person is a registered caregiver, they don't continue doing this to other people. And we said ways of combating GBV. It's for us to have these conversations. It's for us to go educate ourselves on disability matters and for us to create safe spaces for individuals living with disabilities and understanding that even if I have a disability, I am still a human being. I also have human rights. The same way you might want to be treated as an able-bodied person is the same way that you must treat me, even though I have disabilities or I'm living with a disability rather.
Thanks for that, Miso. As you probably saw in the chat, Nathan had that question on whether our discussion is linked to GBV occurring in a specific area, so at work or at school, or whether it's the broader context. And yeah, I did respond that the discussion generally spoke about GBV in the broader context, but we did discuss what the differences would be in scenarios where the instances do relate to GBV, let's say at RES, and it's a student that has been subjected to GBV, and the student is living with disabilities, what then happens, and so forth. So we have tried to give examples. I think, Miso, you also spoke about the home situation where GBV has occurred and it's been by the carer or the aide at home and stuff like that. So yeah, we've spoke about it broadly, but have tried to give specific examples in the discussion. I don't know now if there are any closing comments or questions before we end the session. Miso has posted in the chat the different support services and the, I think, social media platforms. Are there any closing remarks or questions?
Maybe let me step in again for the last time. I think it's very
Yes.
important that we all educate ourselves, and also get us involved in these things, because we don't know when it will be you who is disabled. It's something that no one ever wakes up and say, I'm ready, I can be disabled. So it's really, I think it's a very important subject to look at and to understand, even if today we don't have anyone at home in our neighborhood that we see as being disabled, but it does affect like everyone. And I think it's not just only at school, but it is a broader thing. It's everywhere. So it's something that we really need to take note of, and to also make sure that we educate ourselves and get involved. Um, Try and be close to someone at least, so that you get to understand the ups and downs of the people that uh, are affected, or that have the disability. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that contribution. I agree with your sentiments 110%. We definitely all need to come to the party. It's not a conversation of them versus us. I think even in the broader context of GBV, I think everybody needs to be involved in the discussion. It's not just for women, because women are not the only victims or survivors of GBV. GBV can also happen to men. They can also be victims of GBV. Those who are gender non-binary can also be victims of GBV. And perpetrators of GBV can be women as well, and people who are gender non-binary, and the list goes on. So everyone needs to be involved in that conversation. Nathan, I saw you had your hand up. Please do feel free
So
to speak.
okay, so what I had in mind was just the fact that I wanted to ask, does gender-based violence only occur physically, or can it be implemented on somebody, or like inflicted on somebody emotionally, and or is it only like physically? Like, just wanted to like know like more input like regarding that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nathan. Yeah, Miso had touched on that a bit earlier, but GBV has many different forms. So it's not only physical in the sense of, let's say, assault or rape. It can also be emotional. So emotionally abusing someone, calling them names, demeaning them. It can also be financial. So using money as a means of abusing someone can also fall in line with gender-based violence. So gender-based violence is quite broad. It's not only sexual, it's not only physical, like punching, hitting, or biting, whatever. whatever, can also be verbal or emotional, and it can also be financial. So yeah, there's many different forms of gender-based violence, and as I said, they are different perpetrators of gender-based violence. So women can also be perpetrators of gender-based violence. It's not only men, for example. So a lot of the times when you speak about GBV, people automatically think that the perpetrator has to be a man. It's not the case. It can also be from women abusing men, for example. So yeah, it works both ways. I don't know if that answered you, Nathan.
Yes, you did, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any closing comments? I see now we have just about 2 minutes before our session is over. Is there anyone that would like to say something before we close our session? Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for taking time out to join the session and for participating. We are definitely one step closer towards becoming more aware and advocating more for disability rights awareness, for human rights awareness, and the advocacy against gender-based violence. I have taken a register of everyone that has attended, and if you would like, after the recording has been edited, I can share the link with you. If you'd like to maybe hear Miso's discussion from earlier, if you joined late, that will be possible. So thank you so much, everyone. Please do feel free to reach out to us at the Transformation Office if you do experience any gender-based violence or you want to be part of the support groups, or if you just want to know more about what we do and the resources that we have. Please also feel free to reach out to UADS and reach out to MISO about all the fantastic work that they are doing, and also listen into the radio interviews that they have every Monday, I think MISO said. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.